It seems to happen every time you get a new computer. It starts out super fast, but slowly and surely over the years, it crawls to a near standstill. And you might think that's just what happens. When a computer gets old, it slows down. It's just the way the universe is. But that's not really the case. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Why computers actually get slower and what you can do to completely reverse it. Now, this video is sponsored by my Instagram account. So not really sponsored, but if you want to check it out, it's just @TheoJoe. I try to post cool stuff on there every once in a while, especially in the stories. And if you want, you can check out the highlights from CES this year, Consumer Electronics Show. Lots of crazy stuff on there. Highly recommended. Again, if you want to check that out, it's just @TheoJoe on Instagram. So getting back to why computers slow down, a vast majority of the time, it's not actually the hardware of the computer itself slowing down, but rather the software that's been installed over time, bloating it up, taking up space, and straining the resources of the computer, which eventually slows it down. And yes, because it's software, not hardware, there are things you can do to reverse it. One of the major ones is removing startup programs, or at least stopping them from starting up. And this is pretty obvious. You may already know this, but you weren't sure how to do that, because programs running in the background obviously take up resources such as RAM, CPU cycles. So the more stuff you have starting up, the more stuff that's always on in the background. So that's not good. Now, to stop things from starting up, it's pretty simple. You don't have to uninstall the program altogether. What you can do is, if you're in Windows 10, you can open the Task Manager by pressing Control-Shift-Escape. That'll bring it up, and then you go to the Startup tab, and this is going to show you all the programs that are starting up with Windows. And if you want, you can go through and you can right-click it and hit Disable, and it's not going to start up with Windows anymore. So I would go through this, and stuff that you know is not being used regularly, you can disable it, and this doesn't uninstall it, so you can still start it up whenever you want. It just doesn't start up automatically. Of course, there are some things where if you're not sure what it does at all, I wouldn't necessarily disable it, because some things might be like drivers that might be important or whatever. So only disable it if you know what it is and you know that you don't need it to start up. But if it does start causing problems, of course, you can re-enable it. If you're on Windows 7, it's a little bit different. You go to the Start menu, and then you can type Run, and then I'll give you the option to run a program, and then you type in msconfig, and then that will also bring up a different window that's gonna look different than what I just showed. And you go to the Startup tab in there, and then it's kind of the same story. Disable things you don't need to start up, but don't touch any of the other tabs. They might actually break your computer. All right, so next up, the reason your computer might also be slowing down is because you have a lot of files that's taking up a ton of space on your hard drive, and you're running out of free space. And this might not be for the reason you think for why it's slowing it down. So in the old days, what would happen is your hard drive would get fragmented, which means the hard drive would store different parts of one file all over the hard drive, and it would be fragmented, which meant that if you wanted to open one file, the drive head of the drive might have to move to two different parts of the drive, which would obviously slow things down. So you would have to do something called defragmentation, which would put all the files together. Now, Windows 7 and later automatically does this, so that's not a problem anymore. And with SSDs, it's completely unnecessary altogether. So the real reason that this may be slowing down your computer is the geometry of the hard drive. It's a spinning plate, and just by the nature of it, the outer space of the drive on the outer rim is going to be moving faster than the inner part of the plate of the drive. It's just physics, geometry. When you spin something, the farther part moves faster, which means it can read files quicker. So of course, this means that your hard drive is gonna try and put files first on the outer part of the drive, and then eventually, as it fills up, start moving stuff inwards. So if you delete a lot of stuff over time, as your Windows automatically defragments and kind of re-optimizes the drive, it should improve in space because the files are being moved to the faster part of the drive. So deleting files probably won't be an instant improvement, but over time you'll probably notice it. So what are some of the best ways to find what's taking up most space on your drive? And there's always a lot of like temporary files you completely forgot about, big giant files you might not know are big and giant somewhere. So the first thing you can do is use a free program called CCleaner, which is gonna be able to search through like temporary files that might be taking a lot of space up, and you can clear those out. It also has some features like fixing registry errors and stuff like that. But another one of my favorite programs, which is so useful, is called Windier Stat, which is kind of unique. You basically run this program and it analyzes your drive, and then we'll show you visually where all the space is being taken up on your hard drive, which files are huge, and it'll show that by just showing a giant block, showing a giant file. It'll show you different types of files, and it'll organize them by color if it's a different type of file. So if you see a bunch of purple blocks, for example, that might be a ton of video files. It will also arrange them by location, by kind of just grouping them together. So if you see a big group of a bunch of different of the same type of file, you can look at that and they're probably gonna be in the same directory. So this is gonna give you a very good visualization of maybe there are some giant files or several smaller files that add up to a bunch of space, and this is a really easy way to find that. And you might be able to see, oh, this one random file folder is taking up so much space, I don't need that, and then you can delete it. Of course, if you don't know what something is, maybe Google it, and also be aware that there are some system files like the Hiber file, which is like your hibernation file, so don't mess with that. That basically allows your computer to store all your RAM into a file, and then that will allow it to boot up quicker. Don't mess with that. That might show as a giant file, but other stuff you could probably figure out yourself just by Googling. All right, next up, another reason that's possible is that you might have a lot of dust in your computer, and you might think, well, how does that affect the computer running? But actually it does, because a lot of dust might restrict airflow or stop air from coming into contact with, for example, the CPU, fan, or whatever, and will restrict heat from coming off of it and being taken out of the computer by fans. So if you dust out the computer, then it could potentially reduce the heat, which then might reduce throttling, because if a computer part does get too hot, typically that part will be throttled down and reduce performance so it doesn't get as hot. So if you have a ton of dust in there caked on there, vacuum it out. Usually this is gonna just be for computers that are very old or have not been taken care of very well at all, like it's in a very dusty room or you have a lot of carpeting or something like that. I would just open up the computer, take a peek inside. If there's a ton of dust, that's a problem. If there's just a tiny bit, probably not a big deal, but you can always still get some canned air, blow it out, and vacuum it. All right, I think we're up to number 4, and that reason is, of course, viruses and malware. I probably don't have to tell you this, but if you have a virus that's doing whatever, who knows what, it's gonna be taking up resources that you're not gonna be able to use then on stuff you wanna use it on. Of course, Windows these days does have built-in antivirus in the form of Windows Defender. I'm not sure if it's still called that. It's pretty decent, but if you're really not good with computers at all and you're always going on sketchy websites, it might not be good enough. There are a lot of free antivirus programs these days, and even a lot of paid ones have free versions now. So this is gonna change. The best antivirus is gonna change year to year. So basically all you need to do is go on Google, search best antivirus whatever year, 2019, and then look at some reviews, like PC Mag does good reviews, and basically that's all you need to do. Find the best one, or the one that you're familiar with, get it, and see if it does a scan and finds any viruses. Obviously, if you get a paid antivirus, it's probably gonna come with some extra features like internet security, which I definitely recommend, because that will do something like stop drive-by attacks. It'll stop the virus from happening in the first place. But if you wanna just stick with the free one, it'll probably be okay, as long as you're not really messing with it. All right, so reason number 6 is more of like a very long-term reason. So this is gonna be like over the course of 5 years plus. One reason a computer might get slower is because just modern software being written kind of assumes that the computer is going to be a little bit more powerful. So developers write in more features or write processes that might need faster hardware. So of course, if you have a 20-year-old computer, it's not going to be able to run software that is very modern. So this, of course, is not the reason your computer is slower 3 or 4 years down the line, but if it's older than 5 years, it's possible. But for the most part, this also is only going to apply to like mostly heavy hitter programs, such as like Adobe Premiere Pro, like video editing, stuff like that. If you're just using a web browser, email, stuff like that, that should really not slow down over the course of almost any amount of time, unless it's like 10 years or something like that. And the final reason we're gonna talk about today is that it might just be a change in perception. Of course, if you have a really old computer and then say you get a brand new iPhone or something like that, you might be used to now the faster speed on your phone, and the computer is gonna seem a lot slower. And also these days, we're kind of very used to stuff happening instantly, you know, next day delivery, whatever. You might just be less patient. So you click on something, and if you think, oh, my computer's so old, it's so slow, of course that small delay is gonna seem longer if it's just by placebo effect. So if you get a brand new computer, it might be the same exact delay, but it might not seem as slow. Of course, I'm not saying your computer being slow is all in your head, it's just something to possibly think about. Now, besides those reasons though, what might be some other small things you can do to improve your computer speed? And there actually are a few things. So first of all, the important thing is to always keep your operating system up to date. And this is for many reasons. First of all, for security, you're a lot less likely to get a virus if you're completely up to date on your computer, because a lot of viruses target old, outdated versions. And also, there might be better optimizations in the newer version of the operating system. So definitely worth it to do that. And also driver updates. Like if you have a graphics card, when's the last time you updated your graphics card? It's probably been a while because it's a little bit annoying. You know, it makes the screen go black, it messes up your icons, all that sort of stuff, but it probably will improve performance quite a bit. Another thing you can do to make sure your hard drive is running in pretty good order is to use the check disk command. So you can do this by opening the command prompt, just go to the start menu, type in CMD, and then hit enter and it should bring it up. And you use the command check disk, CHKDSK, and then do /F. And that F is gonna mean that it's gonna try and fix things. And you can also specify a specific drive by doing check disk and then C or D colon, whatever drive letter, and then /F. And that's gonna check for any errors on the drive, bad sectors, stuff like that, try to repair it. And that might improve things if there's a lot of them. Now, another thing to keep in mind is if you're running these check disks regularly and you notice that you're getting a lot of errors, that could be a sign that your hard drive is failing. So if your computer's been running slow or you get a lot of these errors in combination with that, you might want to get a new hard drive, and also make sure, of course, your stuff is completely backed up, though you should be doing that anyway. Another command prompt command you can use is the sfc/scan now command. And this is going to mostly check the Windows installation files to see if there's any corrupted files in Windows, and of course try to repair that. And that's always something good to run if you're having issues with Windows that don't really make sense. It's always worth a try. And finally, another great program is the Windows Memory Diagnostic tool. I'm not sure how far back in versions of Windows this is available. I know it's available in Windows 10 at least. So you type in Windows Memory Diagnostic into the start menu, it'll come up, and it'll probably require you restart the computer. But this will run a memory check on your RAM, and if there's any errors, it will tell you. Now, if you do have a lot of memory errors, typically that's a hardware issue, and you probably will just have to replace the RAM, unfortunately. And memory errors can cause a lot of weird stuff to happen that might not make sense at all. For example, way back in the day when I was playing a game called Battlefield 2, I was getting these weird graphical glitches that I'll show you here, where these bars would come out of different random objects. And sure enough, this was actually a memory error. When I ran a memory check, it showed a bunch of errors. When I replaced the RAM, it fixed it. So even though that looked like it was a graphical error, something you would think was in the graphics card, it was actually part of a RAM error. So that could explain some weird problems you're having. Run that command. Now, if you do want some other ways to improve your computer speed, I'd made a totally separate video on this topic that goes a lot more in depth. It's called 10 tips for making your computer faster for free. And you can just find that on my channel. I'll try to put a link here that you can click on. Highly recommend that video. So hopefully you enjoy that as well. So until next time, guys, be seeing you.